to play that song. And the other video is just Dustin Kensrue walking and yelling at the screen in front of you. And that was much more interesting for a number of reasons. Let me read to you Psalm 115, where we started our worship time today. Not to us, Lord. Not to us, but to your name be the glory, because of your love and your faithfulness. Why do the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in heaven. He doesn't ever please him. But their idols, their God substitutes, are silver and gold, made by human hands. They have mouths, but they can't speak. Eyes, but they can't see. They have ears, but cannot hear. Noses, but cannot smell. Feet, but cannot walk. Nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. Dustin Kensrue, writer of this song, honestly portrays the reality that we've been talking about actually over the past 2 weeks, but he puts it a bit more starkly in some ways too. See, this song vividly depicts how our hearts are bent. We are incurvatus in se, as Augustine put it. We're humans turned in on ourselves. Homer incurvatus in se. We are bent to self-seeking, and that moves us away from who God created us to be. But this series is all about keying into who God has made us to be, what it means to be human, and how that relates to God, obviously, and to sexuality. We've got that kind of sandwiched in the middle there. Over the past 2 weeks, we've talked about what we call the T world. This is Keene talks about the T world, or the traditional world. That's sort of, marriage is kind of this, almost like a duty. It belongs within marriage. It's mostly for procreation, for having babies, and it sounds like it overlaps with the Christian view. We talk about how that's not actually quite the same as a traditional world. We talked about the I world, or the individualist world. And this is where we really focused our attention on the last 2 weeks. The I world is the world that we are living in presently in our culture. It's the world that basically says, in terms of expressive individualism, says whatever brings me as an individual to fulfillment, that's what I need to pursue in life. And sexuality becomes a big part of that as well. As long as I don't hurt anyone else and sex is consensual, then it's okay. What's the problem? There's no other, you might say, boundaries if we take God out of the picture. But then we talk about the R world, which is the relational world. This is the Christian view of sexuality, is that God created us for relationship with himself, with others, with our own selves, and the rest of creation. And that sexuality fits within that context of being made for relationships. Sexuality is a part of a particular type of relationship we saw between a man and a woman in covenant with each other. And a little bit of what we looked at as well is, and we'll look at a little bit in a moment here, is, let me back up for a second. Well, number one, you can find both of those previous talks, if you'd like to see them, on our Summit Drive Facebook page. And if you're not a part of our Summit Drive Facebook page, our Young Adults one, we can make you part of that tonight. It's a closed group. It's Summit Young Adult Ministries, Young Adult Singular, Ministries plural. Yeah, if you search that and ask to join us, someone will let you in. It'll be me or someone else. You can watch those previous 2 talks there. But as we saw in this song from Dustin Kensrue, simply seeking for riches or sexual pleasure, or to be honored by adoring children or a loving spouse, or to gain accolades from others for our service, all of that, Kensrue says, is not enough. Because we were made for a relationship with God. And Kensrue concludes that it's not enough, and it actually never was. See, an idol, as we come back to this our world, this relational world, we are meant for relationship with God to be our first and best relationship. Again, St. Augustine talks about sin as disordered love. It means that we've loved the wrong things too much, we've elevated those things, and we've loved the right things too little. We've downgraded those things. And in the our world, our love for God is to be the apex. That's to be at the center of our hearts. And another way of defining sin is idolatry, and that's what this video is about. It's making something other than God our God. It's that elevating it above the right relatedness. And so one of what happens when we have these God substitutes, a good way to define idolatry is an idol is a God substitute. It's something or someone who we elevate to be the ultimate in our life. The place that we look to for our identity, to answer the who am I question. If something or someone answers your who am I question, and it's not God, that would be a God substitute. It comes down to our security. Who do I look to, or what do I look to? For a sense that I'm secure, that I don't need to fear. If we look to something like money or status to tell us that we're someone or that we are secure, those things become God substitutes. And humans, in many ways, we idolize many things. John Calvin called the human heart a perpetual idol factory. That we'll keep finding thing after thing after thing to replace God, to keep our attention away from Him. And we often idolize sexuality, in fact, or sexual fulfillment. One of my professors, she talked about a popular form of idolatry. She called it sex as salvation. And we hear that in the lyrics to many popular songs. Two very catchy tunes will make the point. Number one, of course, sex is portrayed as paradise in Bruno Mars's song that you know. He says, never had much faith in love, miracles, and then never want to put my heart on the line. Exactly. It's actually written in the lyric sheet here, so I'm just reading the lyrics. But swimming in your world is something spiritual. Spiritual. Okay? No. Okay, I'll stop. I will. I'm born again. I'm born again. Born again? Wow, that's biblical language. That's the language of Jesus, actually. We're coming into relationship, right? Relationship with God. I'm born again every time you spend the night. Okay. And then the chorus, of course, goes, because your sex takes me to paradise. Speaking of heaven in terms of what seems to me like a non-covenantal relationship here. But he adopts biblical language to speak about just simply the act of sleeping with someone else. But often in the Christian world, too, in fact, I think often, sex, in the context of marriage even, can become idolized as well. But instead, we don't idolize sex itself, but maybe that relationship. To go to a pop song again, sort of make this point, how we see it in the I world, or the world that is kind of focused on whatever fulfills me individually. That's how I know what's right or wrong. In the context in which we swim, there's a Bryan Adams song. It's classic. It's from when I was a kid, so you might not know it. It's baby, you roll it out. That one. Yeah, something. That's it. Yeah. I'm finding it hard to believe. Who is this? Singing. I can't just do this. Wow. Okay. Oh boy. Okay. Find it hard to believe. We're in heaven. Okay. Thank you. And your love is all that I need. And I found it there in your heart. It isn't too hard to see. We're in heaven. Again, Tim Keller calls this apocalyptic romance. Meaning, it's the belief that if only I could find that one person, then the hole in my heart would be filled. I'd finally be complete. And in the video we saw, one of the reasons I wanted to show it was you see a picture of the person's heart. It's kind of exposed so we can see it. And what the idol, that kind of goo or whatever it is that's going into this person is coming into their heart, and then there's this hole, and it's just spilling back out again. In fact, it's filling their whole world. What's going on is this, what the idol is giving them is not doing it. It's not bringing life. And for many people, and even for many Christians, our view of sexuality isn't much different than that. If I only find this person, then I'll be fulfilled. The Christian view says, and I'm just quoting Augustine, left, right, and center here. I don't know why. I guess he thought a lot about sexuality in a good way. And idolatry, and he's helpful. But the 4th century pastor and theologian Augustine, he says this in the beginning of his book, Confessions. He prays to God. He says, you've made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. So when the Bible talks about sex and sexuality, we see that it is a good part of a marriage union, but it never presents itself as an ultimate, something that should fill us up, something we can look to say, yes, now I've made it somehow, I've found what I've been looking for. See, only when we love God as first and best will all our other relationships begin to be set in right order as well. As I said, Augustine called sin disordered love. What he means is, again, loving the wrong things too much and the right things too little. And that does disorder our lives. I've used this example before, but I'll use it again. If I love my job more than I love my wife or my kids, do you think they would notice? And that would do something what it would do is it would unravel my family life. And I think that would actually, well, for me anyways, that would unravel my work life too, in a major way. Loving the wrong things too much, disordered love, that's sin. Jesus tells us that to be human, the way that what we were made for, the way we were made to bring glory to God, was to love God with all of ourselves, heart, soul, mind, and strength. Do you think that would include our sexuality? Yeah, I think so. It's our whole self. We're loving God with everything we have and loving our neighbor as ourselves. The reality is that I don't love God as my first and best, and neither do you. And I don't love my neighbor as I love myself, and you don't either. But that's why the good news is so significant, so important to us. That the good news is that even though there are times when I fail to love God as first and best, and I do actually daily in some way, something else competes with God to be my ultimate, and I think you know what I'm talking about. And something competes with my ability to rightly love my neighbor as myself, actually, and it's my own selfishness that steps in there. But the good news of Jesus is that God does not write us off or take us out, but that God himself comes in human form, and he lays down his life voluntarily to forgive me, to give me a new heart, to actually fill up my heart, to rightly relate me to himself and to others, to my own self, to actually repair how I relate to myself too. And that is the center of the Christian faith, is that God is a relational God who's calling us back into relationship with himself, and he does it at his expense so that we can come freely to him. I don't know where all of you are at tonight, for sure. But I do know this. There is no other hope that you have in the world but that. There's no other place that you can look. You can, as the Dustin Kensrue song would say, you can walk the world over till your shoes are filled with blood, looking for the thing that will fill you up. But your heart was made for God to be first and best. And I would just invite you tonight to put your trust in Jesus, that he gave everything to make you his. And when that heart is rightly related, when we know the love of God for us expressed in Jesus, he gives us his Holy Spirit to empower us for the life that he's called us to live, a life of love and gratitude. And guess what? It's a life of following Jesus. So I just want to now, starting from that place, that's the center of Christianity, is that God, through his son Jesus, has given everything to win us back. And ultimately, we are looking forward to a day when God will send his son Jesus again and redeem and renew and put back into right order all that was broken and lost. And everyone who's put their trust in Jesus will be a part of that new creation. And so we anticipate and look forward with hope to that. And for most of you in this room, I think, you're on the path already of Christian discipleship, following Jesus. And I just want to make a couple of quick points to summarize some of what we looked at last 2 weeks, and then to shift us into, we're going to look at the book of Proverbs a bit tonight. But I wanted to set all of this in the context of loving God as our first and best. That's at the heart of where we're going. So any reflection that we have on sexuality and what it means, it has to be set in this broader relationship with God context, or else it'll seem like we're sort of thinking of God as this distant sort of, why would I want to please him? Not recognizing that he's done everything to make us his, and one day we'll finally and fully be in his perfect presence. Preston Sprinkle has been summarizing in a book review that I've been working through. It's several parts, but he's looking at Jonathan Grant's book called Divine Sex. And I just want to cover a few points that will wrap up a few of the loose ends from the last weeks, and then we'll shuffle forward. Make sense? Is everyone with me still?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you were asleep, because you could just be having a nap. But, okay. First, Christian discipleship, of which our sexuality is a part, is looking forward to when God makes all things new. So a Christian vision of the good life, of human flourishing, is always oriented toward the future. We should never expect to find full satisfaction in this life. I am preparing a number of young couples for their upcoming weddings and lifelong marriages. Anthea and Carl being one of those couples. I don't know if there's any other couples in this room I'm working with. No. Anyways, I get them. Did I get you guys to do this? I get most couples to do this, to look at each other and say, you cannot make me happy. You can't fulfill me. Yeah, I did, didn't I? First session, almost always, first session. Just get them to make sure that they know when they walk into this marriage relationship, they will not be what the other person is looking for. They can't be. Only Jesus can be that. But they can love each other, support each other, help each other to become, and to know God, and to become all that God is calling them to be in Christ. And guess what? If you're single, it's not like you're missing out on that. We actually have the community of the church to help us become all that God in Christ has called us to be too. Marriage is one set of difficult circumstances that shape you to become more like Jesus. It really is. Guess what? Singleness is also a set of circumstances that is difficult and is shaping you to become more like Jesus. It's not like God chooses to use marriage to sanctify people, but not singleness. He uses both. So whatever your status in life right now, whether you're married or single or engaged, somewhere in between you feel like, you have the opportunity to struggle. You will. If you're married, you're struggling in some way or another. And that struggle is God saying, here's how I'm trying to sharpen you. Here's how I'm trying to change your character. And if you're single, you're facing struggles right now. Yes, you are. And those struggles are meant to shape your character, to make you more like Jesus as well. And both of those relationships, both the marriage relationship and the single relationship, both of those are in the context of the broader community of faith. So it's not like once you get married, then, okay, now I'm sort of separate from the community of faith. No, you still need to be both to equip and share your love and faith with the rest of the community, and they are to equip and share that love and faith with you too. Okay, that's way off my notes, but it needed to be said. Oh, right, this is what we were saying. We should never expect to find full satisfaction in this life. Everything about Christian obedience has an already, Christ has already come. We already know him personally, but not yet. We're still waiting the coming of the kingdom in final and full sense. Has an already and not yet shape to it, and we must view our sexuality on similar lines. I agree. Second, and related, suffering and incompleteness is part of every relationship, even sexual ones. Jonathan Grant writes, Christianity takes suffering seriously and treats it as an important, inevitable, and even necessary part of our spiritual and moral development. Do you think of suffering as necessary, important in your development? Do you think of it in that way? That's a Christian view. Isn't that a good view? It's like an eyes wide open thing. It's like we will suffer in this life. Yes, it's inevitable. And in fact, God will use it for our good. It's a part of our spiritual development. It's part of our moral development to face those struggles, those challenges. Here's how Preston Sprinkle summarizes. Since all sexual longing is part of a greater human longing that will only be fully satisfied in the new creation, we cannot idolize sexual fulfillment or expect to experience it fully in this life. Paul says in Romans 8:18, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not even worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us." Much of our current conversations about sexuality, even within the church, either does not believe what Paul says to be true. Come on, Paul. We're supposed to live as though the future is better than right now? We're supposed to bank our lives on that? No, I think I'll try to get what I want for right now, because I don't really trust the future that God has for me is really good. What do you think of that? Do you think he's right? That even Christians don't believe Paul in Romans 8:18? I struggle to. Imagine you do too. Do we really believe that the life after this life is going to be better than this life? If we don't believe that, it will be hard to follow Jesus. Because Jesus will ask us to do things like, wait on that. So you're not married? Okay. So pursuing sort of a one-night stand, that's not what I want for you. But God, I'll find a sense of fulfillment. I have something better, actually. If my ways are different than that, it will be very hard to follow Jesus if we don't believe in the future that Jesus has for us. The sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed to us. So he says, we often don't believe that what Paul says is true, or we think that sexuality is not a part of the suffering of this present time. It is actually. We're all going to wrestle in some way with the reality that there's no part of our life that isn't touched in some way by sin. And when sin is in the mix, there will be some form of suffering around it. Okay? Does that make sense? So the Christian understanding that humans are, quote-unquote, totally depraved, you might have heard that before, that doesn't mean that everything about us is totally just garbage. It's not actually what it means. It means that there's no part of human life that isn't in some ways touched by sin and affected by it. And that includes our sexuality. And that means there'll be suffering there in some way. So he summarizes this way. Christians shouldn't be shocked when our sexual lives don't bring us full satisfaction that we were programmed to expect. They were never meant to. Like Kensrue says, it's not enough. It never was. And we need to realize that. Sexual fulfillment will not fill you the way you were programmed to expect it to. The idea of apocalyptic romance, if I only find him or her, my life will be satisfied, is not true. And that's really important for us to know. Okay, enough of that. Was just the introduction. Longest introduction in the world. What time is it even? I don't even know.
It's like 8:40.
Is it really?
Yeah.
You guys are kidding me. Oh boy. Okay, open your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 5. Okay, let's just wrap up. Let's call this a wrap up instead of that being the introduction. Let's focus our attention on the Proverbs, this wisdom literature. We find very clear instructions here on how to avoid sort of destructive sexual directions. Yeah, there's a good word. And instead, what a healthy sexuality would look like. At least gives us part of the picture. It doesn't give us the full picture, but I think we need to focus on the Proverbs. There's a slogan that's pretty much true in our world, or we pretty much adhere to it, I should put it that way. And it goes like this: you live and you... Yeah, okay. You live and you... Yeah, that's it. Someone got it. You live and you learn. And here's the deal. I hope that we learn through our experiences, both the hard things and the good things. We should learn through those things. But the book of Proverbs offers us something different and better. It says you learn so that you can live. It sort of puts learning in front and says, actually, you don't have to just make a mess of your life and then learn from it before you get somewhere. We actually have wisdom that we can draw on. And here's what we find in Proverbs 5, verse 1. It's what you have in this portion of the Proverbs is like a father having a conversation with his son. You could imagine, and I think it would be okay to say that these principles go for beyond just speaking to a son. It could be to a daughter as well. And you can reverse some of these things. But I think this is particularly poignant, the description that he gives for young men as well. But I would say that many of the same teachings apply ladies too. Does that work? So here's what he writes, Proverbs 5:1. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Turn your ear to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. So what's the instruction here? It's simply this, pay attention. The son needs to listen to his father. And we need to listen to our Heavenly Father to maintain, and you see that, and this is true for what we think about sexuality. That's a very basic point, Dave. It is. But it's huge. It's huge, huge. How do you say it? Never mind. I can't say it's huge without thinking of our lovely, okay, anyways. Why pay attention? It's huge. 2 reasons that the Father gives. He says that you may maintain discretion. We need this wisdom for ourselves. We need to listen to the words, just as the Son needs to listen to the Father, we need to listen to our Father, what the Scriptures teach about sexuality in particular, for ourselves, so that we know it. But listen, there's a second reason. And your lips may preserve knowledge. Here's the deal. What we know about sexuality from what is revealed to us through the Scriptures, when we speak to our friends and neighbors, we will influence those around us. And now I ask myself, how can young people, even Christian young people, as Anthony mentioned 2 weeks ago, how can they come to a place where they believe that sex outside of marriage is really a legitimate option, even for a Jesus follower? How can people come to that conclusion? Well, if they're listening to the voices of those who won't challenge that view. So the way that you speak about sexuality, if it reflects the teachings that we find in the Scriptures, will influence people toward the things that God has designed them for. Or you can speak about sexuality the way that our culture does. And guess what will happen? That knowledge will not be on your lips. You will lose opportunities to encourage people in a way that really points them to life and to God's plans for them. And so listening, just listening to what God says, is a significant part of us getting on his page. But then listen to what the Father says next to the Son in verses 1 to 3. He says, my son, pay attention to my wisdom, for this part. Turn your ears to my words of insight, that you may maintain discretion and your lips may preserve knowledge. For the lips, so he's making a comparison now, for the lips of the adulterous woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is bitter gall, sharp as a double-edged sword. There's this contrast, his words versus competing voices. In this case, it's the words of a woman who is trying to get this young man into bed. We make 1,000 choices a day. And we need to ask, why am I choosing to listen to this one instead of that one? Who am I listening to? Who is leading me? Because everyone is following someone. I know. We would like to think that we're all free thinkers and we're just doing things on our own, but you're not. Sorry. Everybody is following somebody else. So the question is who? Who are you following? Which voices are you listening to? And that's just a simple first point, I know, but it's that if we want to be wise with our lives, our sexual lives included, we need to attend, to listen to what God is saying in the Scriptures. And that's what we've been trying to do in this series so far. You learn so that you can live. And when we're attentive to God and his words and his ways, we'll be hearing something different. Something that is meant, at least in part, to be protective as well. That's the next thing we see. Listen to what the Father says. He says, her words may be sweet, but, let me just flip there. Psalms, Proverbs, there we are. Okay. Verse 5, chapter 5. So her words may be sweet, but her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. She gives no thought to the way of life. Her paths wander aimlessly, but she does not know it. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door to her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to the one who is cruel. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. At the end of your life you will groan. When your flesh and body are spent, you will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors. And I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. We need to be aware of the true risks of walking a life that is not the one that God has for us. We've talked about the I world for the last 2 weeks, expressive individualism as a way of viewing the world. And it says, when it comes to sexuality, as long as sex is consensual, as long as no one gets hurt, I mean, there's really no other boundaries than that. But what does the Father say here? He speaks of losing your honor and your dignity. Even in our world today, where consent seems to be really the main significant element for sexual ethics, and of course it is. Consent obviously matters. It even matters within a marriage, actually. It's not like sex can be non-consensual inside of a marriage, right? So yes, consent, of course, but it's to say if that's the only sort of boundary. Anyways, we still, in our culture today, we still recognize sexual scandals, don't we? We recognize that when there's an adulterous relationship and it's a public figure that's involved, it's still seen as like something's wrong here. Though we would still like to think that what happens in the bedroom, that's totally a private deal. But what this text says that it's not. It actually, how we relate to others in terms of sexuality, people who are not our spouse, is going to have serious ramifications, not only for ourselves personally, or for the relationship between you and the other person, but actually that's going to impact the whole community.